It's early evening, dinner time. Outside it's already dark, and that night marks the first snowstorm of the season. The roads are messy and slippery. People outside shoveling snow, circling around the block trying to find parking before heading home for the night. Everything feels normal until around 7 p.m. A 911 call comes in. A resident reports smoke coming from the ground floor of their apartment building. Firefighters are dispatched immediately, but when they arrive, just minutes later, something feels off. The apartment where the smoke is coming from is locked, not just closed, it's locked from the outside. And even more disturbing, the fire doesn't seem accidental, it seems pretty targeted. Like someone set it deliberately, precisely, not to burn the whole apartment building, but just one unit. At that point, firefighters have no choice, they're forced their way in. Inside, the fire has already caused significant damage. Smoke fills the air and the heat is intense. And as they try to control the flames, they make a horrific discovery. In the bedroom, they found a young woman, completely naked and tied to the bed. There are clear signs of physical and sexual abuse. And based on initial observation, it seemed like the fire has started right next to her, as if someone was trying to get rid of the evidence. This woman's name was Catherine Daviau. She was only 26 years old, and by the time firefighters found her, she was already gone. Police are called immediately, and very quickly investigators confirm what everyone was suspecting all along. This was not an accident, it was a crime scene. The area is secured and police are collecting their first evidence that later will become crucial in the investigation that would take years to unfold. But before we go any further, let's talk about Catherine, because behind every case there's a person. Catherine Daviau was 26 years old. She had blonde to light brown hair and blue eyes. From everything we know, Catherine made a full presence in the lives of people around her. Her friends describe her as living a simple life, a simple but a full one. She lived in a small, cozy apartment in Rosemont, but she loved Montreal. She loved the diversity of the city, the energy of the big city. And like many people her age, she loved going out and enjoying life's little moments. She loved going around her neighborhood, stopping by her favorite bakery on Saturday mornings to pick up fresh croissants. Her friends described her as a very loyal person, the kind of friend who always listens to you, who always ready to help you, who's always there for you, who cared about the little things, who cared about people around her, and overall just being a very, very nice person. Catherine loved traveling, and for her it meant freedom. But at the same time, she appreciated the routine, stability, a quiet, comfortable life. And knowing that, it's easy to picture, to imagine her coming home after a long day, tired, maybe thinking about dinner or shower. And that what makes that even more terrifying. Was someone watching her? Was someone deliberately observed every move she made? Because think about that. Coming home feels safe. It's your safe zone. It's where you let your guard down. And that's what makes it so strange and so horrifying. She was living alone and someone was watching her, maybe spying on her. As a woman, it hits really hard to think about these things because it could happen to any of us. Now let's go back to that day, the 11th of December 2008. Like any normal day, Catherine left work at around 4:30 p.m. She was driving from Petite-Patrie to Rosemont. I'm sorry if my pronunciation of French words is really not good, but that's what I have. So she was driving from Petite-Patrie to Rosemont, a commute of about 30 kilometers. Montreal is a big city, and during the rush hours, that drive can take up to an hour or even more sometimes. The traffic on the highway is very heavy, and that night, with the snowstorm coming, everything slowed down even more. Roads are slippery, visibility is low, so it's reasonable to assume that Catherine arrived home from around 5:30 to 6 p.m., but no one knows that for sure. No one except her killer. What we do know is that around 5:30 p.m., Catherine was still driving because on her way home she was talking to her friend Veronique. Veronique had invited her over for dinner that night, but Catherine declined. She said she was very tired and she just wants to get home and rest. And that detail is just, whoa, what if? There's so many what ifs in this story. And that call became a very important detail in the investigation. It helped to establish the window of opportunity, a time frame in which the crime likely occurred. Since Catherine was still driving at 5:30 p.m. and the neighbor called 911 exactly at 7:07 p.m., that gives a window of less than 1.5 hours, which means that the attack likely happened between 6 and 7 p.m. Catherine was also known to be very routine oriented, and police relied on her habits during the investigation. And it raised the question, could those routines have worked against her? Could someone have been watching, learning her schedule, waiting for the right moment? Because the truth is, habits are easy to notice. We all have them. And sometimes they tell about us more than we realize. Now imagine someone with harmful intentions is trying to spy on your routine, watching your every move. Things that felt safe will now work against you. And in the reality, I think it happens more often than we think. Going back to the investigation, for years investigators had no solid leads, no clear suspect, no motive, nothing. No explanation for the level of violence. And I must remind you that that happened near the dinner time. Everyone was still awake around her. It was a busy street, so it seems kind of unbelievable that no one heard or saw anything. As I mentioned earlier, Catherine really loved to travel, and just before the events of that night, she mentioned to her friends that she wants to go somewhere warm to escape the winter. I mean, honestly, who can blame her? So around that time, she signed up on Craigslist. She placed there two ads, one to sell her car and the second one to sublet her apartment. So she was slowly preparing for the new chapter in her life. And that obviously became a very, very interesting lead in the investigation, because police thought that maybe it was someone from the Craigslist. Could a seemingly normal meeting have gone wrong? At that time, every possible scenario was explored. So everyone who had interacted with Catherine through the platform was asked to provide a DNA sample in hopes of matching it with the traces they found on the scene. But nothing came up. No matches, no hits. When her body was discovered, the first responders noticed one thing. There were no signs of the forced entry. Even more strangely, the apartment, despite being on fire, was locked. Every access point was secured. Windows, doors, everything, which strongly suggests that either Catherine knew the attacker or she willingly let him in. What investigators believe later happened is that she was overpowered, placed in a position where she couldn't defend herself, sexually assaulted, and then the apartment was set on fire to get rid of the evidence, obviously. And before leaving, the killer closed the door from outside, leaving her trapped in an apartment that was on fire. One theory suggests that the killer went further than he expected during his attack, and that's why he had to set up the whole place on fire to cover his tracks. There were also disturbing forensics details, like Katrine's perfume. They were found near her bedside, and police believe they may have been used to accelerate the fire. Tire wraps were also found at the scene. That strongly suggests premeditation. The autopsy revealed that her cause of death was because of the deep penetrating wounds to her chest and abdomen, meaning she was likely stabbed with a knife. Those forensic details were sent for the DNA testing, but again, at that time nothing was found. Once police confirmed that it was a homicide, the whole family of Catherine was questioned. No one of them was a suspect at any point, and I only imagine the kind of shock that they experienced. Catherine was so young, she had her whole life ahead of her. A year later, in 2009, Catherine's case was still unsolved. At that time, someone whose name is not disclosed stepped in and offered $3,000 Canadian dollars as a reward on any information that would lead to the arrest. A few months later, that reward increased to $5,000. But even with that rewards, there were no tips, no progress in the case. At that time, one of her friends came up with the testimony that a few days before the murder, Catherine and Veronique, they went to a bar. At the end of the night, they decided to separate. Catherine decided to take a taxi back home. Initially, Veronique was very worried about that because they were arriving together and they were planning on leaving together. But Catherine assured that everything will be fine and she just wants to go home early. And tragically, that will be the last time they will ever see each other. They will speak on the phone later, but they will never see each other again. Veronique said that she was replaying that night over and over in her head, wondering if someone they met that night could be responsible for the murder, but she had no idea who could that be. Time passed. It's been 9 years since the murder, and there were no new developments until the 24th of March 2017. That's when the new information about Catherine's case was finally made public. Police said that the killer was trying to cover his tracks and leave no evidence by setting the apartment on fire. But he made a few mistakes and he left some DNA samples. So investigators had the DNA of the killer, but they still couldn't find any match. In December 2018, police created a composite sketch based on the DNA of the killer, but the image was never released to the public in order to protect the integrity of the investigation. However, it was shown to Catherine's family and friends to see if they will recognize the man. They didn't. Police said that they will continue to test and retest the DNA samples they have with the updated databases. They were testing and retesting, but still there was no match. But they were pretty sure that it was a matter of time to find the killer. And they were right. Finally, the DNA got a match from the genealogy bank. Police was able to identify a killer as Jacques Bolduc, and he was a very known person to the police. He was serving a sentence for 2 armed robberies and 2 attempted murders, a repeated offender who was on parole at the time of the murder. The investigators found that he contacted Catherine a few days before her death, after she had placed the online ad to sell her car. In August 2025, the lab was able to scientifically confirm that the DNA collected at the crime scene was that of Jacques Bolduc. He died of natural causes in 2021. Yes, he died in prison while serving time for other crimes he committed, but he was still never charged with this murder. And given that Bolduc has died, police considered the case to be solved and closed. But it's amazing how, with new technologies, police are solving crimes that have been cold for many years and decades. This is it for today. I wish you all a good day, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.